What happens when prejudice blinds us to the truth standing right in front of us? When Vivian Harrington's luxury car crashed that fateful night, she immediately pointed her finger at Marcus Johnson, the black mechanic who rushed to help her. "You did something to my car. I saw you touching it," she accused as sirens wailed in the distance. But what if the person you're so quick to blame is actually your savior? As Marcus's reputation and livelihood crumbled under false accusations, a shocking truth was waiting to be uncovered, one that would force Vivian to confront not just her prejudice, but a reality about herself she wasn't ready to face. Will justice prevail for the man who risked everything to save a stranger who despised him? Watch this incredible story of redemption and discover how one moment can change two lives forever. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The evening air hung heavy with humidity as Marcus Johnson wiped the sweat from his brow. The clock on the garage wall read 9:43 p.m., nearly 2 hours past closing time at Johnson & Williams Auto Repair. The shop lights cast long shadows across the concrete floor as Marcus worked methodically on the engine of Mrs. Patterson's old Buick. She was a retired teacher who couldn't afford a new car, and Marcus had promised to have it ready by morning. Just a few more adjustments, Marcus muttered to himself, his skilled hands moving with precision born from years of experience. At 35, his fingers bore the honorable scars of his craft, calloused palms and oil-stained fingernails that no amount of scrubbing could completely clean. The sudden screech of tires outside jerked his attention away from the engine. Then came the sickening sound of metal hitting concrete, followed by the crash of breaking glass. Marcus dropped his wrench, which clattered loudly against the floor as he bolted toward the entrance. Outside, a sleek white Mercedes had swerved off the road and crashed into a telephone pole about 50 yards from his garage. Smoke was already rising from under the crumpled hood. "Hey, anyone in there?" Marcus shouted as he sprinted toward the wreckage. Through the spider-webbed windshield, he could make out a woman slumped over the steering wheel. The airbag had deployed but didn't seem to have fully protected her. Without hesitation, Marcus tried the driver's door. It was jammed. He moved quickly to the passenger side, managed to wrench it open, and carefully reached across to check on the driver. She was a white woman in her early 40s, dressed in what Marcus could tell was expensive clothing. A diamond tennis bracelet sparkled on her wrist as it caught the streetlight. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Marcus gently placed 2 fingers on her neck, relieved to find a strong pulse. As he reached to unbuckle her seatbelt, his mechanic's eye caught something alarming, fuel dripping from underneath the vehicle. The woman's eyelids fluttered. What happened?" she mumbled, her voice weak but carrying the unmistakable edge of someone used to authority. "You've been in an accident. I need to get you out of this car right now," Marcus explained calmly but firmly. As her eyes focused on Marcus, her expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Who are you? What are you doing to my car?" she demanded, suddenly trying to pull away from him. "Ma'am, I'm trying to help you. Your car is leaking fuel. We need to." "Get away from me," she shrieked, fumbling for her phone. "Help.
Someone help me." Marcus could smell the fuel getting stronger.
Making a split-second decision, he carefully but quickly unbuckled her seatbelt despite her protests and lifted her from the vehicle. She struggled against him, her diamond bracelet scratching his arm as he carried her to safety just as the first small flames began to lick at the undercarriage of the Mercedes.
"Puis me down."
"You're stealing my jewelry," she accused, her voice growing stronger with anger. "Your car is about to catch fire," Marcus said firmly, setting her down on the sidewalk at a safe distance. As if to punctuate his statement, there was a whoosh as the leaking fuel ignited fully. The woman's eyes widened in shock as she watched her luxury vehicle become engulfed in flames. Then, without warning, she slumped unconscious again. Marcus quickly checked her pulse and breathing, then pulled out his phone to call 911. As the wail of approaching sirens filled the air, the woman's eyes fluttered open once more. Her gaze fell on Marcus kneeling beside her, and then drifted to his oil-stained hands. In the distance, her burning car illuminated the night. "You," she whispered, her voice filled with venom. "You did something to my car.
"I saw you touching it."
The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow, just as the first police car and ambulance rounded the corner. The antiseptic smell of the hospital corridor made Vivian Harrington's nose wrinkle in disgust. She sat upright in the emergency room bed, an ice pack pressed against her forehead, her Prada blazer stained with soot. The curtain separating her from the next patient offered little privacy as she recounted her version of events to Officer Bennett for the third time. "I'm telling you, that man tampered with my car," Vivian insisted, her manicured finger pointing accusingly at the air. "I stopped for gas earlier today near his shabby little garage. He must have recognized my car and done something to it." Officer Bennett, a steady-eyed man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, wrote calmly in his notepad. "And you're certain it was the same person, Mrs. Harrington?" "Mr. Johnson, the owner of Johnson and Williams Auto Repair." "Of course I'm certain." Vivian snapped. "You think I wouldn't remember a man who was lurking around my $60,000 vehicle? He was wearing the same dirty coveralls with that garage's logo. I noticed him watching me when I left the gas station." Officer Bennett nodded without commitment. "And according to the paramedics, this same man pulled you from your vehicle before it caught fire."
Vivian avait doué the comment à Yves Swatting à fly.
A convenient cover for whatever he did. Why else would he be right there when my perfectly maintained car suddenly malfunctioned? She winced as a throb of pain shot through her head. "I want him arrested immediately. Do you have any idea who I am? My husband sits on the city council." At that moment, the curtain parted, and Dr. Sarah Chen entered with a tablet in hand.
"Mrs. Harrington, how are you feeling?"
"Any dizziness or nausea?" "I'll feel better when the criminal who sabotaged my car is behind bars," Vivian replied sharply.
"When can he leave this place?"
"I need to call my lawyer." Dr. Chun exchanged a glance with Officer Bennett before turning back to her patient. "We still need to run a few more tests. You lost consciousness twice, once during the accident and once after. That's concerning." "I fainted because of the shock of being nearly killed by that mechanic's tampering," Vivian insisted. Officer Bennett cleared his throat. "Dr. Chun, in your professional opinion, could Mrs. Harrington's loss of consciousness have caused the accident, rather than resulted from it?" Before the doctor could answer, Vivian cut in. "That's absurd.
Yves never fainted in my life before today."
This was clearly sabotage. Across town, Marcus sat in the small office at the back of his garage, his head in his hands. Terrence Williams, his business partner of 8 years, paced the cramped space. "She's really pressing charges?" Terrence asked incredulously. "After you pulled her from a burning car?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Officer Bennett said she's adamant that I tampered with her Mercedes when she stopped for gas today." He looked up, his eyes troubled. "The problem is, Terrence, I do remember her car. She pulled into the Shell station while I was fixing the air pump. But I never went near her vehicle." "This is ridiculous," Terrence fumed. Did Bennett seem like he believed her?
Hard to tell.
"He was professional, took my statement, asked if we had security cameras."
Marcus Siguet d'Avilly.
"Which of course we don't, because we couldn't afford them after paying for the new hydraulic lift." A notification chimed on Marcus's phone. It was a text from his sister. "You're on the news."
Colm NOW.
With a sense of dread, Marcus opened the local news website. There it was, already spreading. Prominent businesswoman accuses local mechanic of vehicle sabotage. His garage was named in the second paragraph. "This could ruin us," Marcus said quietly, the weight of 15 years building his reputation crashing down around him. "You know how these things go for people who look like me." Terrence stopped pacing and put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "We'll fight this, Mark. The truth has to count for something." Marcus wanted to believe him, but as his phone began to ring with calls from concerned customers, he wondered if the truth would be enough against someone with Vivian Harrington's wealth and connections. The morning sun streamed through the blinds of Marcus's modest 2-bedroom apartment, illuminating framed diplomas and certificates that lined the wall of his home office.
Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, with honor. Master S degré in Automotive Engineering.
3 patents for engine efficiency innovations. A faded photograph showed a younger Marcus in a pressed shirt and tie, standing proudly next to a prototype hybrid engine at Westland Motors Corporation. That had been another life. Before the glass ceiling became all too apparent. Before his innovations were credited to his white colleagues. Before he'd overheard the VP of engineering say they needed Marcus's brain but not his face for client presentations. Marcus straightened his tie now, a simple blue one, worn for the meeting with the lawyer Terence had insisted they consult. His phone buzzed with another notification, another appointment cancellation.
The third this morning.
His sister Alicia's voice echoed from their call last night. This isn't fair, Marcus. After everything you've accomplished, some rich woman can just point a finger and everyone believes her. Fair or not, it was familiar. It was why he'd left Westland Motors 8 years ago, despite the prestigious position and six-figure salary. It was why he'd pooled his savings with Terence to open their own garage, where their work could speak for itself without corporate politics and subtle biases diminishing their worth. The garage had flourished because of Marcus's exceptional technical knowledge and Terence's people skills. They'd built a loyal customer base who appreciated quality work at fair prices.
Until yesterday.
When Marcus arrived at the garage, he found Terence already there, sweeping up broken glass from the front window where someone had thrown a rock overnight. Spray painted across the garage door were the words, "CR Saboteur." "I already filed a police report," Terence said, his normally cheerful face grim. "Officer Bennett actually sounded concerned when I called it in." Marcus surveyed the damage silently. The rock had missed the vintage Mustang they were restoring by inches. "Any word from Mrs. Patterson about her Buick?" Marcus asked, trying to focus on the work they still had. "She called to cancel. Said her son would take her car to the dealership instead." Terence didn't meet Marcus's eyes. "That's 8 cancellations since last night." Marcus nodded, absorbing the blow without visible reaction.
"Let's finish the Buick anyway."
She might change her mind. As they worked, Marcus told Terence the full story of his time at Westland Motors, details he rarely shared with anyone. "I was their diversity hire poster child," he explained, methodically adjusting the carburetor. "They loved putting me in their corporate brochures, showing how progressive they were. But in meetings, my ideas needed validation from white colleagues before anyone would consider them."
Terence whistled low.
"But you were the one with the fancy MIT degrees." Degrees didn't matter as much as fitting their image of what an automotive engineer should look like. Marcus tightened a bolt with more force than necessary. The breaking point came when they presented my hybrid fuel injection system to the board as Gregory Watson's innovation. He got the promotion and bonus for my work. "So you just walked away from all that?" Terence asked, handing him a smaller wrench. "Not right away. I filed complaints, went through proper channels. But eventually, yes, I walked away." Marcus straightened up from the engine. "Started freelance consulting while I got my mechanic certification, saved up, met you at that auto show in Phoenix, and the rest is history." The bell above the garage door chimed, and both men looked up, surprised to have a customer given the graffiti outside. Marcus recognized Mr. Grayson, the retired history teacher who'd been bringing his classic Thunderbird to them for years. "Morning, gentlemen," Mr. Grayson said, his white beard neatly trimmed as always. "Saw the news. Came to see if you needed anything." "Just your continued business would help," Terence said with a grateful smile.
Monsieur Grayson scoffed. "I fide take my baby anywhere else. Listen, Marcus, I've known you for what? 6 years now?"
"Anyone who thinks you'd sabotage a car doesn't know the first thing about you." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "I appreciate that, Mr. Grayson. The community center board is meeting tonight. Many of us whose cars you've serviced will be there. We'll be discussing how to support you through this nonsense." After Mr. Grayson left, 3 more longtime customers stopped by with similar messages of support. Each visit strengthened Marcus's resolve, reminding him why he'd chosen this path, to build something honest with his own 2 hands, where his work could stand on its merit. As they closed shop for the day, a news van parked across the street. The reporter looked eager for a statement.
Vulture, Terence Mutterd.
"No," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Maybe it's time people heard my side of the story."
The whole story.
He walked toward the camera, straightening his shoulders and lifting his chin. He'd faced prejudice before. He'd rebuild his reputation again, one truth at a time. Officer Bennett sat at his desk, carefully reviewing the statements from both Vivian Harrington and Marcus Johnson. 22 years on the force had taught him to look beyond initial appearances, and something about this case didn't add up. The phone on his desk rang. Bennett speaking. "Officer, this is Jason Reed, Mrs. Harrington's executive assistant." The voice was polished and precise.
Mrs. Harrington wanted me to follow up on the status of the investigation.
"She's quite distressed about the whole ordeal." Bennett suppressed a sigh. This was the third call from Harrington's camp in 2 days. "Please inform Mrs. Harrington that we're conducting a thorough investigation."
These things take time.
"Perhaps I should mention that Mr. Harrington has spoken with Chief Wilson about expediting matters," Jason replied, his tone carrying a thinly veiled threat. "You can mention whatever you'd like, Mr. Reed," Bennett said evenly. "I'll conduct this investigation properly, regardless of who makes calls to whom. Good day." After hanging up, Bennett turned to the evidence collected so far. The fire had damaged much of Vivian's Mercedes, but the forensic team had managed to recover the vehicle's black box data. He flipped through the preliminary report, his brow furrowing as he read. The data showed a significant drop in heart rate from the driver approximately 7 seconds before impact, followed by erratic steering. There was no braking until 3 seconds before the crash, and even then, it was minimal. It looked more like the actions of an unconscious driver than mechanical failure. Bennett picked up his phone again and dialed Marcus Johnson's number.
Monsieur Johnson, this is Officer Bennett.
"I'd like to discuss some technical aspects of the case. Would you be available to meet at your garage in an hour?" At Johnson and Williams Auto Repair, Marcus was under the hood of a Honda Civic when Bennett arrived. The graffiti had been painted over, but business clearly remained slow. Only 2 cars waited in the service area, compared to the usual 6 or 7. "Thanks for coming by, officer," Marcus said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What can I help with?" Bennett held up a folder. "I've got the preliminary data from Mrs. Harrington's car. Given your background in automotive engineering, I thought you might provide some insights." Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "You know about my engineering background?" "I do my homework, Mr. Johnson," Bennett said with a small smile. "MIT graduate, former engineer at Westland Motors. I'd say you're overqualified to run this garage." They sat in Marcus's small office, reviewing the black box data together. Marcus pointed to the heart rate monitor readings, a feature in newer luxury vehicles. "See this drop here? It happens before any mechanical anomalies. The car was functioning normally until this point." His finger traced the timeline. "Then the steering goes erratic, consistent with an unconscious driver. The fuel line rupture happened after impact, not before." Bennett nodded slowly. "That's what I thought too. So in your professional opinion, there's no evidence of tampering?" "None whatsoever," Marcus confirmed. "If I wanted to sabotage a car, this isn't how it would manifest. And I certainly wouldn't do it to a car that could be traced back to me." As Marcus walked Officer Bennett out, the policeman paused.
One more thing, Monsieur Johnson.
"Do you have any idea why Mrs. Harrington would specifically accuse you?"
Marcus Siguet-Davilly.
"Unfortunately, officer, I've been asking myself that same question since it happened." Across town, in her luxurious penthouse apartment, Vivian Harrington was having her blood pressure checked by a private nurse while Jason Reed updated her on his call to Bennett. "I don't care what that officer thinks," Vivian snapped as the nurse removed the cuff.
You know what he saw.
"That man was watching me at the gas station, and then suddenly my car malfunctions?"
It's too convenient.
"Of course, Mrs. Harrington," Jason agreed smoothly. "And this presents an excellent opportunity. Johnson's garage is in a prime location that your development company has been eyeing. A lawsuit could force him to sell." Vivian's eyes narrowed thoughtfully.
You always see the angle, Jason.
"That's why I keep you around." She turned to the nurse. "Well?"
What is the verdict?
The nurse looked concerned. "Your blood pressure is still elevated, Mrs. Harrington. Dr. Chun recommended monitoring it closely after your fainting episode." "I didn't faint," Vivian insisted sharply. "I was rendered unconscious by the crash that mechanic caused." As the nurse packed up her equipment, Jason pulled out his tablet. I've drafted a press statement about your intention to file a civil suit against Johnson. With your approval, we can release it tomorrow. Vivian smiled coldly. Perfect. Let's see how his little garage survives that. The headline of the Metropolitan Daily News was unmistakable: Harrington heiress sues local mechanic for vehicle sabotage. Below it, a photo of Marcus's garage contrasted sharply with an elegant portrait of Vivian in business attire. The article detailed Vivian's accusations and mentioned her family's prominence in local real estate development. Marcus's side of the story was relegated to a single paragraph at the end. At Johnson & Williams Auto Repair, the phone had stopped ringing altogether. The few loyal customers who remained weren't enough to cover overhead. Marcus stared at the empty service bays, calculator in hand, trying to figure out how many more weeks they could stay afloat. "Marcus, you need to see this," Terrence called from the front office. He had the local news channel playing on the small TV they kept for waiting customers, not that there were any today. On screen, Vivian Harrington stood at a podium, perfectly coiffed and dressed in a designer suit. "I'm pursuing this case not just for myself, but for public safety," she was saying. "Who knows how many other vehicles this man has tampered with? How many other lives he's put at risk?" Marcus felt his stomach twist as the camera cut to footage of him walking into his garage, his face grim, refusing to comment to the reporter chasing him. "The defendant, Marcus Johnson, has refused to address these serious allegations," the news anchor commented. "Sources tell us Johnson was previously fired from Westland Motors under suspicious circumstances."
Déteste Ali.
Marcus shouted at the screen. "I resigned."
Terrence switched off the TV.
"They're twisting everything, man. This is character assassination." The bell above the door chimed, and both men turned, surprised to have a visitor. It was Mrs. Patterson, the elderly teacher whose Buick they'd fixed the night of the accident. "I came to pay you for fixing my car," she said, her voice soft but determined. "My son says I shouldn't, given what they're saying on the news, but I've known you boys too long to believe that nonsense." Marcus swallowed hard. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. That means a lot." As she handed over the check, she added, "The community center board met last night, like Mr. Grayson said. We're organizing a support rally this weekend. Not everyone believes what that rich woman is saying." After Mrs. Patterson left, Marcus stepped outside for some air. Across the street, a mother hurriedly ushered her children to the other side when she saw him. The owner of the deli next door, who'd greeted Marcus warmly every morning for years, averted his eyes and quickly went back inside. "Don't let them get to you," Terrence said, joining him outside.
The truth will come out.
"Will it?" Marcus asked quietly. "You know how this goes, Terrence. When someone with money and power points a finger at someone like me, the truth doesn't always matter."
Someone like you?
"You mean a brilliant engineer who could have been making six figures but chose to serve his community instead?"
Marcus gave a sad smile.
"We both know that's not what they see first." That evening, as Marcus drove home, he noticed a car following him. It stayed 2 vehicles behind, making the same turns he did. Paranoia, he told himself. But when he pulled into his apartment complex, the car drove slowly past, its occupants clearly taking photos. Inside his apartment, Marcus found his answering machine full of messages, some supportive, but others filled with threats and racial slurs. His email wasn't much better. The lawsuit had brought the trolls out in force. He sank onto his couch, the weight of injustice heavy on his shoulders. On his coffee table sat a framed photo of his late parents at his MIT graduation, their faces beaming with pride. His father, who'd worked 2 jobs to help pay for Marcus's education, had always told him, "Excellence is your armor. They can't deny what you've earned." But sometimes, Marcus thought bitterly, they could simply ignore it. Dr. Sarah Chun frowned at the test results on her screen, then at her patient sitting on the examination table. Vivian Harrington was checking emails on her phone, clearly impatient to leave. "Mrs. Harrington, I have your test results," Dr. Chun began carefully. "There's something I need to discuss with you." "Is this about the lawsuit?" Vivian asked without looking up. "Because my lawyer advised me not to discuss my injuries with anyone until after." "This isn't about the lawsuit," Dr. Chun interrupted gently. "It's about why you lost consciousness that night." And possibly before. That got Vivian's attention. She lowered her phone. What do you mean, before? I told you, I was perfectly fine until that mechanic did something to my car. Dr. Chun pulled up the cardiac readings on her tablet and turned it toward Vivian. These show an arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat. It's a condition called cardiogenic syncope. Essentially, your heart occasionally fails to pump enough blood to your brain, causing you to faint. Vivian stared at the screen, her expression shifting from dismissal to confusion.
D'était-ce impossible? Amine perfectels.
I do Pilates 3 times a week. Physical fitness doesn't prevent all cardiac conditions, Dr. Chen explained. This particular arrhythmia can be hereditary. Did anyone in your family have heart problems or unexplained fainting?
Vivian S. face palette slitly.
My father. He died of a heart attack at 52. And my aunt once collapsed at a family wedding. I'd like to refer you to a cardiologist immediately, Dr. Chen said, already writing on her prescription pad. In the meantime, you absolutely should not be driving. Not drive? That's ridiculous. I have meetings, appointments. Mrs. Harrington, Dr. Chen said firmly, according to these results, you most likely lost consciousness while driving, which caused your accident. Not the other way around, and certainly not because of vehicle tampering. Vivian's mouth opened and closed without words. Finally, she managed, you can't possibly know that. The data is quite clear, Dr. Chen replied, handing her the referral. And I'm obligated to report this condition to the DMV. Your license will be suspended until you're cleared by a cardiologist. Vivian's hand trembled as she took the paper. This is a mistake. It has to be. I understand this is difficult news, Dr. Chun said sympathetically. Is there someone I can call for you? Your husband, perhaps?
No.
Vivian said sharply, then composed herself.
No, thank you.
I'll call him myself. But instead of calling her husband, Vivian called Jason Reed as soon as she left the examination room. Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day, she instructed. And find me another doctor. Dr. Chun is clearly incompetent.
Is everything all right, Mrs. Harrington?
Jason asked, concern evident in his voice.
Everything is fine, Vivian snapped. Juste dos à ce point.
In the hospital parking lot, Vivian sat in her replacement vehicle, a rented Lexus, with the engine off, staring at the referral in her hand. If what Dr. Chin said was true, then the accident wasn't caused by tampering. Which meant her lawsuit against Marcus Johnson was baseless. Which meant she had publicly accused an innocent man. Her phone rang. It was Derek, her husband. Viv? How did the follow-up appointment go? Vivian hesitated, then made a decision.
Fine.
Just some bruising from the airbag.
Nothing serious.
Good, Derek sounded relieved. Listen, about this lawsuit against the mechanic, are you absolutely certain he tampered with your car? Jenkins from the club says the guy has quite a reputation for honesty in the community. Of course I'm certain, Vivian replied automatically, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. Why would you question me on this?
I'm not questioning you, Honey.
I just want to make sure we have all the facts before this goes further. The man's business is apparently suffering already. Since when do you care about some mechanic's shop? Vivian deflected, her voice rising. Honestly, Derek, sometimes I wonder whose side you're on. After hanging up, Vivian sat motionless, Dr. Chen's diagnosis echoing in her mind. If she dropped the lawsuit now, she'd be admitting she was wrong. The humiliation would be unbearable. And what if the doctor was mistaken? What if Johnson really had done something to her car? Derek Harrington sat in his home office, staring at his computer screen with growing concern. As a successful real estate developer with an eye for detail, something about his wife's accident story had never quite added up. Now, with Vivian asleep upstairs after taking a prescription sedative, something she'd never needed before the accident, he was conducting his own investigation. The security footage from the Shell station near Johnson's garage played on his screen. He'd had to call in a favor from the station owner, who initially seemed reluctant until Derek mentioned his wife's lawsuit. Frame by frame, Derek watched as Vivian's white Mercedes pulled in for gas. She remained in the car while the attendant filled her tank. In the background, a man in coveralls, presumably Marcus Johnson, was indeed working on the air pump. But contrary to Vivian's claim, Johnson never approached her vehicle. He remained focused on his task, only glancing up briefly when Vivian's car drove away. Derek leaned back in his leather chair, rubbing his temples. Why would Vivian lie about something so easily disproven? He thought about how adamant she'd been, how she'd snapped at him when he'd expressed even the mildest doubt. It wasn't like her to be so defensive, even considering her naturally strong personality. His phone buzzed with a text from Jason Reed, prepared statement for tomorrow's press conference per Mrs. Harrington's instructions.
Awaiting your approval.
Attached was a document outlining even more serious allegations against Marcus Johnson, including a claim that sources had confirmed previous instances of vehicular tampering. Derek's jaw tightened. This was going too far. He dialed Jason's number. "Mr. Harrington," Jason answered smoothly. "Did you receive the press statement?" "I did," Derek replied tersely. "Where is this information coming from, Jason? What sources have confirmed previous tampering?" There was a pause. "Mrs. Harrington said you were aware of the research I'd conducted." "Well, I'm not," Derek said flatly. "And I want this press conference cancelled until I've had a chance to review all the evidence personally." "With all due respect, sir," Mrs. Harrington was very specific about. "I don't care what my wife said," Derek interrupted, his patience wearing thin. "This is a serious accusation that could ruin a man's life. We need to be absolutely certain." After hanging up, Derek returned to his computer and searched for information about Marcus Johnson. What he found surprised him: numerous community service awards, patents for automotive innovations, an impressive educational background. This didn't fit the picture Vivian had painted of a shady mechanic tampering with cars for unclear motives.
The next morning, Derek confronted Vivian over breakfast.
"I saw the Shell station footage," he said without preamble. "Johnson never came near your car." Vivian's hand, reaching for her coffee cup, froze midair.
For a moment, je n'eus une confusion crossait leur face.
"What?" "No, I saw him. He was lurking around my car while the attendant was distracted." "The footage shows otherwise," Derek said gently. "And I found something else concerning. Dr. Chun called to check on you yesterday. She seemed surprised when I said you were doing well, since apparently she diagnosed you with a heart condition that may have caused you to faint while driving."
Vivian's face flushed. "She's mistaken."
"I'm getting a second opinion." "Viv," Derek reached across the table for her hand, "what's really going on here? If you lost consciousness while driving, that would explain the accident far better than some conspiracy theory about a highly respected mechanic with multiple engineering degrees."
Engineering degré.
Vivian repeated, latching onto this new information. "How do you know about his background?" "Because unlike you and Jason, I did some actual research before trying to destroy someone's reputation," Derek replied, frustration evident in his voice. "This lawsuit needs to stop, Viv. Now, before it goes any further." Vivian yanked her hand away. "I can't believe you're taking his side over mine. Do you have any idea what dropping this lawsuit would do to my reputation? To our standing in the community? I'm more concerned about what pursuing a false lawsuit will do to an innocent man's life," Derek countered. "And since when do you care so much about what people think?" "Since always." Vivian snapped, rising from her chair. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of your precious real estate deals, you'd know that." As she stormed out, Derek noticed Jason Reed standing in the doorway, having apparently overheard their argument. The assistant's expression was calculating, almost pleased at the discord. "Is there something you need, Jason?" Derek asked coldly. "Just dropping off some documents for Mrs. Harrington to sign," Jason replied smoothly. "Regarding the lawsuit."
Derek's eyes narrowed.
"Leave them with me. I'll make sure she gets them." As Jason handed over the folder with obvious reluctance, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that his wife's assistant was somehow encouraging this vendetta against Marcus Johnson. But why? What could Jason possibly have to gain?
The fluorescent lights of the police impound law cast harsh shadow across the charred Romain of Vivian Harrington's Mercedes.
Marcus circled the vehicle slowly, his trained eye catching details others might miss. Officer Bennett stood nearby, clipboard in hand, while two automotive forensic specialists from the state police watched Marcus with professional curiosity. The fire damage is extensive, Marcus noted, crouching to examine the undercarriage. But not where you'd expect if this was deliberate tampering. One of the specialists, Dr. Rivera, nodded in agreement. That's what I thought too. The primary fuel line was ruptured by the impact with the pole, not before. Marcus pointed to a blackened component near the driver's side front wheel. This is interesting. The brake line on this side shows signs of long-term wear, not recent tampering. See how the corrosion pattern develops along the seam. That's months of exposure to road salt, not damage from the crash. Bennett made notes while the specialists exchanged impressed glances. Mr. Johnson, the second specialist, Wilson, asked, "Could you walk us through exactly what you did when you approached the vehicle after the accident?" Marcus straightened up. "I tried the driver's door first, but it was jammed. I went around to the passenger side, which I managed to open. Mrs. Harrington was unconscious when I first reached her. When I checked her pulse, I noticed fuel dripping underneath the vehicle, not from the main tank, but from the fuel line near the engine." "And that's when you made the decision to remove her from the vehicle?" Bennett asked. "She actually regained consciousness briefly," Marcus continued. "She was confused, disoriented. I told her about the fuel leak and that we needed to get away from the car. She became agitated, accused me of trying to rob her. But the smell of gasoline was getting stronger, so I made the call to get her out despite her protests." Wilson was examining the driver's seat. The airbag deployed correctly. Impact sensors functioned normally according to the black box data.
What about this?
Dr. Rivera called out, pointing to something in the footwell on the driver's side. Using a flashlight, he illuminated a prescription bottle that had rolled under the pedals.
Propranolol, Eride.
That's a beta blocker, often prescribed for heart conditions. Officer Bennett took the bottle in a gloved hand. Prescribed to Vivian Harrington, dated 3 months ago. Interesting that she never mentioned this. Beta blockers can cause dizziness, especially when starting the medication, Dr. Rivera explained. If she wasn't taking it regularly as prescribed, or if she just started it, she could have fainted at the wheel, Marcus finished the thought. The team spent another hour examining every aspect of the vehicle. The evidence continued to mount: no signs of tampering, multiple indicators of a driver who had lost consciousness, and the revelation of an undisclosed heart medication. "One more thing I need to show you," Marcus said as they were finishing up. "The night of the accident, I noticed something odd about the way the flames spread after the fuel ignited." He pointed to a particular pattern of burn marks along the underside of the engine compartment. "See this area where the burning is less severe? That's where I managed to crimp the leaking fuel line before carrying Mrs. Harrington away. The main flow was diverted here," he indicated a different section, away from the passenger compartment.
Wilson whistled low.
"If you hadn't done that, the fire would have reached the cabin much faster," Marcus confirmed. "And given how quickly the first responders arrived, Mrs. Harrington would likely have suffered severe burns, at minimum." Back at the police station, Bennett compiled the findings into an official report. The technical evidence was overwhelming. Not only was there no indication of tampering, but Marcus's quick actions had actually prevented the situation from becoming far worse. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, his voice betraying the weariness of someone who had been fighting an uphill battle. Bennett closed the file and looked at him directly. "Now I present these findings to the district attorney. Given the evidence, they'll almost certainly decline to file any criminal charges against you." "And the civil lawsuit?" Marcus asked. "The one that's already destroyed my business's reputation?" "That's a separate matter," Bennett admitted. "But this report will certainly help your defense. And..." He hesitated, then continued, "I'll be having a conversation with the Harringtons about filing false police reports." As Marcus left the station, his phone rang. It was Terrence. "How'd it go?" his partner asked anxiously. "The evidence is on our side," Marcus replied, allowing himself a small moment of relief. "No criminal charges. But the damage to the garage's reputation." "About that," Terrence said, his voice suddenly lighter. "You're gonna want to get back here.
Someone waiting to talk to you.
Who? Marcus asked, confused by Terrence's almost cheerful tone.
Derek Harrington. Vivian Lessusban.
And man, you won't believe what he has to say. The tension in Marcus's small office was palpable. Derek Harrington, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, sat across the desk, examining the framed engineering degrees on the wall with obvious interest. MIT, Derek remarked, breaking the silence. Impressive. I tried to get in there myself, but had to settle for Cornell. Marcus remained guarded. Mr. Harrington, I appreciate you coming, but I'm not sure what we have to discuss while your wife's lawsuit is still active. Derek turned his attention back to Marcus. That's precisely why I'm here. I believe my wife's accusations against you are unfounded, and I want to help set the record straight. Terrence, who had been standing by the door, let out a low whistle. That's not what we expected to hear. I imagine not, Derek agreed with a grim smile. But I've always valued truth over appearances, even when my wife doesn't. He pulled out a USB drive and placed it on the desk. This contains security footage from the Shell station. It clearly shows you never approached Vivian's car, contrary to her claims. Marcus picked up the drive cautiously. Why are you sharing this with me? Why not just convince your wife to drop the lawsuit? I've tried, Derek sighed. But there's more going on here than a simple misunderstanding. Vivian was diagnosed with a cardiac condition that likely caused her to lose consciousness while driving. She's refusing to accept the diagnosis or its implications. Pride, Terrence suggested. It's easier to blame someone else than admit your own health is failing. Derek nodded. Partly that. But I also believe my wife's assistant, Jason Reed, is encouraging this lawsuit for his own reasons. He's been pushing for more aggressive action against you from the beginning. Marcus leaned forward. What reasons would he have? I've never even met the man. That's what I'm trying to figure out, Derek replied. What I do know is that Jason has been interested in real estate in this neighborhood for some time. He's mentioned several times how unfortunate it is that certain businesses, like yours, are occupying valuable development space.
The implication in the air.
If Marcus's garage went under because of the lawsuit, the property would become available. And given the current economic pressures, it would likely sell for far less than market value. So this was never about the accident at all, Marcus said slowly. It was about getting my garage off this corner. I can't prove that yet, Derek cautioned. But I intend to find out. In the meantime, I want to offer you something. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. This is a formal statement acknowledging that I, as co-owner of the Harrington assets, do not support the lawsuit against you and believe it to be without merit. I've also arranged for a press conference tomorrow where I'll make this stance public. Marcus stared at the document, almost unable to believe what he was seeing. This could change everything. But won't this cause problems between you and your wife?
Derek's expression hardened slightly.
Vivian and I will work through our issues privately. What I won't allow is an innocent man's life and business to be destroyed because of her pride or her assistant's agenda. After Derek left, Marcus and Terrence stood in stunned silence for several moments. Did that just happen? Terrence finally asked. The husband of the woman suing us just handed us a get-out-of-jail-free card? Marcus nodded slowly, still processing. But something still doesn't add up. Why would Jason Reed care so much about this specific property? There are plenty of other corners in this neighborhood.
Terence shrugged.
Maybe he just seized an opportunity when it presented itself. Rich people do that all the time. Maybe, Marcus conceded. But his engineer's mind, trained to look for patterns and connections, couldn't shake the feeling that there was a missing piece to this puzzle, something that would make all the disparate elements click into place. The conference room at the police station was uncomfortably crowded. Officer Bennett had set up a large monitor at one end, with chairs arranged in a semicircle facing it. Vivian Harrington sat rigidly beside her husband Derek, while Jason Reed hovered anxiously behind them. Marcus and his lawyer, a community attorney who had offered her services pro bono, sat on the opposite side of the room. Thank you all for coming, Bennett began, standing beside the monitor. Mrs. Harrington, in light of new evidence, the district attorney has asked me to present these findings to all parties before any further legal action proceeds. This is highly irregular, Jason interjected. Mrs. Harrington's civil suit is separate from any criminal investigation. That's true, Bennett acknowledged. But when evidence of this nature comes to light, we have an obligation to share it to prevent any miscarriage of justice. He clicked a remote, and the screen displayed footage from a traffic camera positioned near the accident site. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m., the night of the crash. This footage clearly shows Mrs. Harrington's vehicle approaching the intersection, Bennett narrated as they watched the white Mercedes moving erratically on screen. Note the unusual driving pattern, drifting across lanes, inconsistent speed. The video continued, showing the car suddenly swerving off the road and crashing into the telephone pole. Moments later, a figure, clearly Marcus, appeared, running from the direction of his garage toward the crashed vehicle. As you can see, Bennett continued, Mr. Johnson arrived at the scene after the crash occurred. There's no indication he had any prior contact with the vehicle. Vivian's face remained impassive, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her purse. Bennett clicked to the next video, security footage from the Shell station. This is from earlier that day, when Mrs. Harrington stopped for gas. The footage clearly showed Vivian remaining in her car while the attendant filled her tank. In the background, Marcus could be seen working on the air pump, never approaching her vehicle. That's not what I remember, Vivian said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. He must have approached my car when the camera wasn't pointing that way. The camera's view is continuous, Mrs. Harrington, Bennett replied gently. There's no gap in the footage. Derek placed a hand on his wife's arm.
Vive, please.
We need to face facts here. Bennett moved on to the next piece of evidence, dash cam footage from the first responding police cruiser, showing Marcus carrying Vivian away from the car just as flames began to engulf it. According to the fire department's analysis, Bennett explained, Mr. Johnson's actions in crimping the fuel line and removing Mrs. Harrington from the vehicle likely saved her from severe burns or worse. The final footage came from a nearby business's security camera, with a different angle of the crash scene. This one showed Marcus's initial approach to the vehicle and his careful examination before extracting Vivian. Our technical experts have analyzed this footage frame by frame, Bennett said. At no point does Mr. Johnson do anything that could be construed as tampering or theft. In fact, you can clearly see him checking Mrs. Harrington's vital signs and securing the leaking fuel line before carrying her to safety. The room fell silent as the footage ended. Bennett turned on the lights and addressed Vivian directly. Mrs. Harrington, we've also recovered your prescription medication from the vehicle, propranolol, for a heart condition. Dr. Chun has confirmed this condition could cause sudden loss of consciousness, which aligns perfectly with the driving pattern observed before the crash. Vivian's composed facade finally cracked. I don't remember it that way, she whispered. I was so sure he did something to my car. Memory can be affected by trauma, Bennett offered kindly. And when we lose consciousness, our brains sometimes create false memories to fill in the gaps. Jason leaned down to whisper urgently in Vivian's ear, but Derek intercepted.
Détesseneuf, Jason.
The evidence is clear. But sir, Jason persisted, we've invested considerable resources in this case. The property implications alone. Derek's head snapped around. Property implications? What are you talking about? Jason faltered, suddenly aware of his mistake. I just meant that the garage's location has nothing to do with this accident, Derek finished coldly. Unless there's something you've been planning that I'm not aware of? Before Jason could respond, Officer Bennett interjected. Actually, Mr. Reed, we've been looking into some interesting financial transactions between you and Apex Development Corporation. Would you care to explain why you've been receiving consulting fees from a company that has been trying to acquire this entire block for the past year? Jason's face drained of color. That's a private business arrangement. It has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with this case if you've been using Mrs. Harrington's accident to further a real estate scheme, Bennett countered. Marcus, who had remained silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. The corner where my garage stands, it's the last property Apex needs to complete their development project, isn't it? They've bought everything else on the block. All eyes turned to Jason, who was now visibly sweating. I was simply being proactive about Mrs. Harrington's interests, he stammered. If the lawsuit succeeded, the property would likely become available at a favorable price. It was a potential opportunity, that's all. An opportunity you manufactured by encouraging my wife to pursue false accusations, Derek said, his voice dangerously quiet. You're fired, Jason. Get out. As Jason hurriedly gathered his things and left, Vivian finally turned to face Marcus directly. For the first time, she looked at him, really looked at him, not as a stereotype or a scapegoat, but as the person who had saved her life. I don't know what to say, she began uncertainly. I was so convinced. Mrs. Harrington, Bennett interrupted gently, in light of this evidence, I strongly recommend you consider withdrawing your lawsuit and issuing a public retraction. Otherwise, Mr. Johnson would have grounds to countersue for defamation, with substantial damages given the impact on his business. Derek nodded in agreement. It's the right thing to do, Viv. And it's time to start being honest with others, and with yourself, about your health condition. The reality of the situation finally seemed to sink in for Vivian. Her perfectly maintained composure crumbled completely as tears began to stream down her face. The Harrington penthouse was eerily quiet. Vivian sat on the edge of their king-sized bed, staring at the heart medication in her hand. Derek stood by the window, gazing out at the city skyline, giving his wife the space to process everything that had happened. I've spent my whole life being perfect, Vivian finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect marriage.
Perfect else.
She gave a bitter laugh. The thought of having a defect was unthinkable. Derek turned from the window. A heart condition isn't a defect, Viv. It's a medical issue that can be managed. You don't understand, she insisted. In my family, weakness was never tolerated. My father built his empire by being invulnerable. When he died of a heart attack, my mother called it his one unforgivable failure. Derek crossed the room and sat beside her. Is that why you refused to accept Dr. Chen's diagnosis? Why you were so determined to blame someone else for the accident? Vivian nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes again. When I saw that mechanic, Marcus, examining my car after the crash, it was easier to believe he'd done something to it than to face the possibility that my body had betrayed me. She looked down at the pill bottle in her hand. And now I've destroyed an innocent man's business because I couldn't accept the truth. Not destroyed, Derek corrected gently.
Damaged, yes.
But nothing that can't be repaired with the right actions. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Derek checked his watch. That would be Marcus and his lawyer.
Are you ready for this?
Vivian took a deep breath.
No.
But it needs to be done. In the Harringtons' elegant living room, Marcus sat uncomfortably on an antique sofa that probably cost more than his annual rent. His lawyer, Patricia Williams, sat beside him, legal pad in hand. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. When Vivian entered, Marcus was struck by how different she looked from their previous encounters. Gone was the impeccably coiffed businesswoman with the icy demeanor. In her place stood a woman who appeared smaller somehow, more human, dressed in a simple blouse and slacks instead of designer suits. Mr. Johnson, Vivian began, her voice hoarse but determined. I owe you an apology. A profound one. Marcus nodded silently, waiting for her to continue. I accused you of something you didn't do. I refused to consider other explanations because they were uncomfortable for me to face. Vivian sat down across from him. The truth is that I have a heart condition that caused me to lose consciousness while driving. You didn't tamper with my car. In fact, according to the evidence, you saved my life. And yet you continued the lawsuit even after receiving your diagnosis, Patricia pointed out, her tone professional but firm. Vivian didn't flinch from the accusation. Yes.
Out of pride and fear.
And I was encouraged by Jason Reed, who apparently had his own agenda regarding Mr. Johnson's property. Derek stepped forward, placing a folder on the coffee table. We've prepared a complete retraction and public apology to be released to all media outlets that covered the original story. We're also offering a settlement that includes full compensation for lost business, reputational damages, and additional funds to help rebuild. Patricia picked up the folder and quickly reviewed its contents, her eyebrows rising slightly at the figure offered. She passed it to Marcus, who scanned the document before looking up at Vivian. "Why should I accept this?" he asked quietly. "Do you have any idea what these past weeks have been like? The threats I've received?
The client IV lost?
Some of them won't come back, no matter what retraction you issue." Vivian met his gaze, not shying away from his justified anger. "You shouldn't accept it, Mr. Johnson. Nothing I can offer will fully repair the damage I've caused. But it's a start." She hesitated, then added, "And I'm prepared to do more than just write a check." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked warily. "I want to use my platform and connections to actively help rebuild your reputation. I can't undo what I've done, but I can work to make it right." Vivian's voice grew stronger with resolve. "No settlement agreement will require you to keep quiet about what happened."
I2R voit vers conséquences comme my way.
Marcus studied her for a long moment. The woman sitting before him now seemed genuinely remorseful, a far cry from the entitled accuser who had pointed fingers at him in the aftermath of the crash. "I don't want your money, Mrs. Harrington," Marcus finally said. "What I want is for people to know the truth. And I want my garage's reputation restored." "Then that's what we'll focus on," Derek agreed. "The settlement is still yours. You've suffered real damages that deserve compensation. But we'll work with you on the public messaging to ensure it effectively rehabilitates your reputation." As the discussion continued, Vivian found herself truly seeing Marcus for the first time. His dignity, his restraint in the face of profound injustice, his unwillingness to be bought off. She realized with sharp clarity how her prejudices had allowed her to cast him as a villain when he had been nothing but a hero. "There's one more thing," Vivian said as the meeting was concluding. "I'd like to understand more about your work. The engineering innovations Officer Bennett mentioned. Perhaps I could visit your garage sometime, not as an adversary, but as someone trying to learn." The offer hung in the air, unexpected and fragile, not just a business transaction, but a human connection attempting to bridge the chasm created by prejudice and pride. 6 months later, the grand reopening of Johnson & Williams Advanced Automotive drew a crowd that spilled onto the sidewalk. The garage had undergone a complete renovation, expanded service bays, state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, and a comfortable waiting area. A large banner hung above the entrance, "Serving our community with excellence and integrity." Marcus, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt rather than his usual coveralls, stood beside Terrence, greeting customers and community members who had come to support them. The local news crew was there too, but this time they were covering a positive story. "Mr. Johnson, how does it feel to reopen after everything that happened?" the reporter asked, microphone extended. "It feels like a fresh start," Marcus replied, "and a chance to offer even better service to our community." What he didn't say on camera was how difficult the journey had been. The settlement from the Harringtons had covered the renovations and compensated for lost income, but rebuilding trust had proven more challenging. Some former clients had never returned, despite the public retraction and apology. Others had needed time to be convinced. Across the crowd, Marcus spotted Vivian Harrington arriving with her husband. She looked healthier than she had 6 months ago, her heart condition now properly managed with the right medication and monitoring. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them could have predicted, not quite friendship, but a mutual respect born from confronting difficult truths. Vivian made her way through the crowd to where Marcus stood. "Congratulations," she said, genuine warmth in her voice. "The place looks amazing." "Thank you," Marcus replied. "And thank you for coming." "I wouldn't miss it," Vivian said. "The scholarship program launches next week. We've already had 15 applications from promising engineering students." The Marcus Johnson Scholarship for Automotive Engineering had been Vivian's idea, a way to create something positive from their painful history. The program would provide full scholarships to minority students pursuing degrees in automotive engineering, with guaranteed internships at top companies through the Harringtons' extensive business network.
And how is the hat?
Marcus asked, his concern genuine. "Stable," Vivian answered with a small smile. "Dr. Chun says I'm a model patient now."
How times change.
As they spoke, Officer Bennett arrived, shaking hands with several community members before making his way to Marcus. "Quite a turnout," Bennett observed, surveying the crowd. Word is you're already booked solid for the next 3 weeks. We are, Marcus confirmed. And we've hired 2 new mechanics to help with the workload. Both from the community training program, Terrence added proudly. Kids who needed a second chance, just like we once did. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Patterson, the elderly teacher whose Buick had been in the shop the night of the accident. She walked slowly with a cane but insisted on coming to show her support. Marcus, my dear boy, she said, patting his cheek affectionately.
Ik knew you de comme trop d'istronge den hiver.
You always were too brilliant for just one garage. Indeed, the renovation had included more than just repairs and upgrades. A new sign beside the main entrance read Johnson Automotive Engineering Lab, where Marcus would be developing and testing his own innovations while still serving his loyal customers. As the celebration continued, Vivian found herself watching Marcus interact with the community that had rallied around him. She saw the respect in their eyes, the trust he had earned through years of honest work and genuine care. She thought about how close she had come to destroying all of that because of her pride and prejudice. The sky was beginning to darken when Derek approached his wife. "Ready to head home?" he asked gently. Vivian nodded, taking one last look around the transformed garage. "It's remarkable what people can build when we see each other clearly," she said quietly. "And how much damage we can do when we don't." As they walked toward their car, Vivian paused to look back at Marcus, now demonstrating a new diagnostic system to some fascinated teenagers. In that moment, she felt a profound gratitude, not just for his forgiveness, but for the harsh mirror he had held up to her own character, forcing her to confront truths about herself she had spent a lifetime avoiding. The accident that had nearly claimed her life had ultimately saved something more important, her humanity. And in the process, it had revealed the true character of a man she had been too blind to see. Dear friend, this story reminds us that our quick judgments can cause immeasurable harm to innocent people. Every day, prejudice leads us to see villains where there are heroes, threats where there are helping hands. We must challenge ourselves to look beyond our biases and see people for who they truly are, not who we fear them to be. Marcus and Vivian's journey shows us that redemption is possible, but only when we have the courage to confront difficult truths about ourselves. Their story is a powerful testament to the healing that can occur when we finally see each other clearly. If this message resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to support more stories that shine a light on social injustice and the power of human connection.